Hi there berries, welcome to my Diablo 4 Beta Sorcerer Frost Guide. The main reason why I'm doing Frost as my first video is because that's the one I have the most legendaries of, and I think it's also the one that will surprise the most people of being actually pretty damn good, both in terms of solo and party. I personally tried out, this is my second Sorcerer. I've done 2 level 25s Sorcerers on hardcore. My first hardcore died due to the world boss. That was a full lightning build. On this character I started leveling on fire up to around about 20 and did the last 5 levels as Frost because I was kind of pessimistic about Frost. But I was stupid because Frost is actually pretty damn good, and I hope I can teach you why. Now this build does use quite a few legendaries that do affect Frost, but there's only one really that I'm going to highlight that will probably be a must for this build because it does increase the damage by a substantial amount, which is going to be, I'm just going to mention it now, is the frozen orb we're going to be using. And the one we're looking at is on this little orange star. If you see it, it says frozen orb stays in place after reaching its destination and explodes 2 additional times for 60% of its damage. The explosions will also apply vulnerability with what we're going through in the skill tree. So extra damage, more vulnerability. If you don't know, the vulnerability debuff makes it so that the enemy takes 20% more damage. So, and there's other things as well linked to vulnerability in Frost, especially once you get past level 25, that will make Frozen Orb pretty damn good actually. So I'm going to start you off with the skill tree. We've got 26 points available for us to spend. So let's put 1 point in Frostbolt. And then we're going to be taking the first one in this little tree here, and then we're going to be getting mana regeneration on Frozen. So that's going to help us because no matter what you're playing spec wise, whether it's lightning, fire or frost, you're going to be mana starved, particularly early on. Later on into the game we might have better ways of mana regeneration and things like that, but for now you're going to want to take the mana regeneration on your basic attack. So we're going into our core, which is the right click. And our right click, we're going to want Frozen Orb that we mentioned earlier. And we're going to want to take the Enhanced Frozen Orb. So when we're above 50 mana, it's going to do 30% more damage on the explosion damage. And that also affects, by the way, the augmentation that I was telling you about with the legendary on the staff. And then also Frozen Orb's explosion has a 25% chance to make all enemies hit vulnerable for 2 seconds. Frozen Orb always makes frozen enemies vulnerable. Now, that also works with the explosion. So if they're not on the staff, so it does 2 extra explosions. So you have 3 chances on 25% if they're not frozen already to make them vulnerable. Pretty good. Then we are going to want to take teleport. Now I don't have a point in teleport. I fortunately have gear that gives me defensive 1 in every single defense. So I'm able to take the teleport for free. That might be different for you. Which means you basically essentially lose a point, unfortunately. But teleport is a must-have no matter what sort of spec you're playing. It makes you unstoppable, which makes you come out of crowd control instantly. So if you get frozen or stunned or whatever, you can instantly just blink out of that. Unstoppable is really, really good. There is a legendary augmentation that can make ice armor, which we will be taking, by the way. There is an augmentation that will make this unstoppable. But not having teleport anyway as a blink to get out of like different things, and it's almost basically a must have to have teleport. If you have the unstoppable on ice armor, there is a little bit of an argument to get away from that, and then you could maybe go into, if you want ice armor, you can maybe take Hydra later on, which is actually really, really, really good single target DPS ability. You could take that in the frozen spec that we're doing if you want to drop out of teleport, but I would highly recommend teleport anyway. So for the purpose of this guide, we're taking teleport, ice armor, mana regeneration is increased by 25% when ice armor is up, and we are going to want to take the one where 15% chance if enemies hit us while we have ice armor that they get frozen for 3 seconds. Pretty good. Alright, now we need to keep filling up this bar, so we're going to keep putting points in Frozen Orb, and I can tell you straight away here, we're going to be putting 5 points in this eventually, so we will eventually be maxing out Frozen Orb. Then we want to take the Ice Blades. Now Ice Blades is a very interesting conjure ability. because its damage is only okay. The damage on this isn't really like the thing we're taking this for. One additional thing I should probably add, that this is a free mana cost. It doesn't cost any mana to use, which is really nice. And we can get this cooldown lower via applying vulnerability. So as I mentioned earlier, the Frozen Orb applies vulnerability debuff. Ice Blades apply a vulnerability debuff, or have a 30% chance of doing so. Once we go down here, so Ice Blade's cooldown is reduced by 1 second each time it hits a vulnerable enemy. Against elites, where you're going to be hitting them for at least like 6-7 seconds, and your Frozen Orb is likely to apply vulnerability, this is really good, combined with this other little off branch here, where your blades get 10% attack speed. So let me lock that in. So basically that will mean that on elites and on bosses, you're basically going to have uptime on this like 100%, or near or close to 100%. So it's super good synergy with the Frozen Orb. It means that you're going to be having that vulnerability debuff on the target for pretty much 100% of the time, unless there's some other add interference. So generally you're going to have that vulnerability debuff applied on that target for the majority of the time, and you can imagine that's going to be really good for both single player and multiplayer situations where you're applying all these crowd control debuffs, you're applying a vulnerability debuff, you're becoming a valuable member of your party group by enhancing everyone's damage by an additional 20%. Now moving into here, into our Masteries, we're going to be taking Blizzard, and we are going to be taking the 25% increased damage to frozen enemies, and we are going to be taking, when you have one Blizzard active, you are going to be, your Frozen Orb is going to cost 10% less mana. That's pretty nice. You could potentially opt out into this, out of the two branches, to save a couple of points to put into other things if you wish to. I don't feel like Blizzard's damage is massively huge, and saving 10% mana isn't the biggest thing in the world, so I think later on you could potentially spec out of these two off branches if you wished, in order to either put more points in Blizzard to actually increase its damage on non-chilled and chilled targets, or you could put them in other points, essentially, in other things. Now we have already maxed out our Frozen Orb. We don't want to put more points in Ice Blades because the damage increase per point isn't really that great, and that's not the reason why we're taking the Ice Blades. So we are going to be veering into these little frozen nodes here on the Mastery. So your barriers have a 5% increased duration. So Ice Armor counts as a barrier, so it lasts 6 seconds. Getting 5% in this increases the duration of it by 0.6 seconds. Now, that may not seem like super amazing at the same time, but there are some legendary augments with this that can make this particularly strong. So we'll be increasing the duration by 5%, and then whenever we have a barrier full stop, we apply more chill. So we're going to be putting 3 points in that. So whenever we've got a barrier, we're going to be applying 24% more chill to the target. So the more chill that you apply to the target, repeatedly chilling a target, will make them frozen. So this is going to increase our crowd control even more. And then in the ultimate tree, we're not going to take Deep Freeze. So Deep Freeze is basically, right now, I do not see a valid use for it, apart from it could be useful in really high difficulty levels. But for now, we're not going to be taking this. The cooldown is 60 seconds. The damage is pretty meh. It's basically like a mage ice block in World of Warcraft, but it does a massive AOE frost nova around you. But the damage, it doesn't really warrant it. You basically lose a lot of damage by encasing yourself in this, and this is just like an oh crap button, essentially. It's not worth it at all in its current state. Unless you need it to potentially skip some boss mechanics or something like that. I highly do not recommend this. But there's some interesting things next to it that we're going to be looking into. So Frost skills deal 5% increased damage to elites, which is pretty good DPS buff on itself. But if we look over to here to Icy Touch, you deal 4% increased cold damage to vulnerable enemies. Now, unfortunately, I've only got 2 points left at the end of the beta, so I would love to put another point in this, but we can get that to eventually. It says 8% increased cold damage to vulnerable enemies. We would be able to get that to 12%, and then that combined where an elite target is essentially going to be perma vulnerable, that's going to increase your damage by a lot. So you can see how I'm already quite excited about this. So one thing also that you shouldn't forget when playing Sorcerer is when you hit level 15, you'll get a mage quest, Sorcerer quest. Make sure you do that, and then you can then click on that button. You might have not seen it, the skill assignment at the bottom right hand corner. You can then drag one of your abilities to enhance them. Apparently at level 30 we'll get access to another slot. But what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to put the frozen orb into the enhancement slot, because it gives us 20% chance when we cast a non-basic skill to cast another frost orb, frozen orb, and that works also with all the legendary augments. So you remember the double explosion thing that I was talking about? That works with this as well. And this works literally with any other ability. So whenever I cast like the ice blades, whenever I cast blizzard, whenever I cast the frozen orb, I have a 20% chance of casting another frozen orb. And now the targeting, we'll do some gameplay example of this build so you can kind of see what it's like. But the frozen orb will not go to where your mouse is. It does target a random thing, but it seems to have no minimum or maximum range. So when you cast frozen orb, I'll show you out when we get out, it will always go a set distance away from you unless it hits terrain. Now, the 20% chance one, it seems to have its own, it just goes onto a target, full stop. So it's actually in a way a little bit better than your frozen orb if you don't care what the target's actually hitting. But it's really nice because it just means it's just a huge damage increase for free, and you don't have to worry about doing anything else with that interaction with that. So I'm going to show you my gear that I've got accumulated over the beta for Frost specifically. I mean, I can optimize it a little bit more. If there's a socket, for example, on my head, which I'm just going to randomly whack in right now. But this is what I have. The helmet I have here is just for tanky stats. A little bit of extra barrier generation. Nothing crazy. It's just a tank helmet just to make me tankier. The chest piece here we have, it's quite a lot like the amulet that you'll get in a story quest, which I won't spoil. But basically, a white dome will appear, and if I'm standing inside that dome, I'm immune to all damage for the duration of the bubble, which is lasting 5 seconds. So it's nothing crazy. It's just a nice little item that I picked up. 2.5% damage increase on the item. There's nothing here necessarily augmenting my cold abilities. Now we're going to enter some interesting stuff very shortly. So here, for example, we have a 20% increased crowd control duration and deal 41% increased damage to unstoppable enemies. Now, I haven't come across that many unstoppable enemies, but the 20% increased crowd control duration is going to affect the freeze, it's going to affect the chill. So really, really strong in terms of the frozen stuff. Damaging an elite enemy grants me a barrier, absorbing up to 315 damage for 10 seconds. This effect can only happen every 30 seconds. So this is another barrier. Once we have a barrier up, our damage will be increased by another legendary, which I think I have equipped. And then also the barrier duration is also increased because of the runes and so on. So you can see that the synergy is starting to overlap. Here we have Lucky Hit. So Lucky Hit is a weird thing which I'm not going to go into right now and for this video. But this Lucky Hit, when I hit a crowd control target enemy, there's up to a 50% chance for that crowd control effect to spread to another unaffected enemy. So chill starts spreading like crazy, frozen starts spreading like crazy. Even if you're only frozen one, you then have a chance of spreading it to other people. So it's really, really nice. Now the staff that I was talking about, the frozen orb doing a double explosion, I'll show you in a second what that actually does and makes it visually different as well on the orb for you. On my necklace, I have Ice Armor is active, so that's my number 2 on the hotbar. You leave behind exploding ice spikes that deal 148 damage. Your ice spikes chill enemies for 15 seconds. So these ice spikes don't move. So these ice spikes don't spawn unless you move. So you have to be moving around for these little ice spikes to spawn, and I'll show you that as well in a second. This ring has a 36% more damage to immobilized, stunned, or frozen enemies. So obviously that's a Giga Chad item. That power there is really, really powerful for this build. And then the one I was telling you about earlier, deal 28% increased damage while you have a barrier active. So whenever we've got ice armor active, whenever I've got this barrier from my legs active, we are going to be doing more damage. And honestly, a considerable more damage. 28% damage is nothing to scoff at. So that is kind of like the items that we're going to be using. I'm going to be heading into a dungeon now to show you. And as we head over there, I'll show you the differences of ice armor and frost armor with these augmentations. So let's go to, I don't know what dungeon to go to. I got a quest to go for this one up here. So we'll just wander up to the asylum, whatever quest to do anyway. But yeah, I'll be doing videos covering lightning. Chain lightning I really enjoyed using when I was leveling up on my other character. And in fire, there is the Hydra build, which Hydra is really, really good. Really, probably the highest single target damage ability that the Sorcerer has available so I will be trying to showcase those builds, but I'm trying to accumulate more legendaries like I have with the Frost and for both lightning and fire to really try and showcase those builds pop off. Alright, so for frost armor, so that legendary I was talking about where ice armor is active, you leave behind exploding ice spikes. So we're going to pop the ice armor now. As we move around, you can see like there's little spikes spawning. They do a little bit of damage, they slow down the enemy, so any enemies chasing you will be slowed. This doesn't seem to proc the legendary augment Frozen Orb staying, what is it? No, the Frozen Orb spell augmentation. It doesn't seem to have those individual spikes. Don't seem to have a 20% chance of spawning another Frozen Orb, because if it did, that would be kind of insane. But I've tried it and it doesn't seem to necessarily work. Now I want to show you the difference between the Frozen Orb. So we're going to equip a random dagger here. So this is the Frozen Orb ability. That was the 20% chance proc. The Frozen Orb ability, so you can see it just spirals out and explodes once. Now with the staff, you can see how it stays in place and then it pulses. That's going to increase the chill, that's going to increase the vulnerability chance, and does increase a lot of damage. And if we can get another, you see how both of these do it? Both of the procs do the explosions as well. So this one is like super important really for the Frozen Orb for this Frost build. That's probably the most important thing out of everything. Also a side note, this staff is pretty insane as well because it has overall 20% damage increase to crowd control enemies. So yeah, that helps you do a lot more damage as well when you're you know, doing basically every attack is freezing or slowing a target. So we'll head into this dungeon. I'll showcase the teleport just so you can kind of keep up with what that ability is, and I'll showcase the blades as well. So this is a standard frost bolt as well. It's just a little frost bolt. You got these, one number 4 here is these blades. So they will just follow around, attack the closest target, and apply the vulnerability, or have a chance of applying the vulnerability. We've got Blizzard here. Every time I'm pressing Blizzard, it's spawning a Frozen Orb because of the 20% proc chance. But this is the Blizzard, you know, it's fairly standard, like nothing too crazy going on there. And then we've got the teleport, which is my number 1. There's a little explosion where it lands, but the damage isn't that crazy. The main reason is for progressing through stuff as quickly as possible. You can use this through terrain as well. So if we want to go through this wall, we can do, as long as we can kind of see where the exit path is. So generally the rotation is Blizzard into Frost Orb. And then on bosses, we're then going to be popping the number 4, the Ice Blades, to do more vulnerability. Not too many mobs here, so I'm just going to walk past these. But generally, Blizzard, Frozen Orb, and that is basically the rotation. Using ice armor, you don't necessarily have to use it in terms of defensive, since it's going to give you more mana regeneration when you have active, plus the more damage. With the legendary that I've got, we will be doing more damage with a barrier active. Now if I can find an elite, I can show you. There's an elite here. It looks like... Here's an elite. You can see how quickly that died. With a lightning build, that would take a few more seconds to kill. Hydra builds with the fire would probably be about a similar time on some of those simple targets. But you don't have access to the crowd control, so that's the downside. So we got a big elite here. We're gonna pop the blades. Yeah, soon after I used the blades, the cooldown came off relatively quickly. Can we interact with this? And then the one downside to this build, I'm not going to say like this build is absolutely perfect. The one downside of this boss of this build is the last bosses in dungeons can be potentially a little bit annoying. What ring is this? 4.4% damage, increased damage when you stand still. So on bosses, I don't know if you played the beta or have noticed, but bosses have a stagger bar. Instead of being able to be easily frozen and chilled and kited like this. The more crowd control you do to a target, the more the stagger bar fills up, and then once the stagger bar fills up, then it gets stunned. So in groups, this is quite nice. Solo, fortunately with the ice orb stuff, the damage is okay. I think if you don't have the frozen orb, for some of the dungeons might be quite annoying. For some reason I can't walk down this pathway. Just teleport over it. What have we missed? We need to go over to the other side. So I'm assuming at the end of this dungeon there'll be a boss, and I'll try and showcase the potential problems of Frost on last bosses. But I will say you're still going to be providing a lot of stagger and vulnerability debuff. And overall, I'd say the kill time isn't that much worse than any of the other builds. And in fact, I'd say you're probably a little bit safer overall just because of the... If the boss spawns ads, for example, you can generally crowd control them pretty easily. So when the bar goes purple like that, it basically means they're vulnerable and they're taking that 20% damage increase. And then extra damage from our chill as well because of some of the talent points that we've got. There's another boss over here. Let's give it a whack. You see that was frozen, so I got myself out of it with the teleport, since that makes me unstoppable. Scroll of Escape. Here's a tip. I was going to save this for a different type of video, but since we've got one drop. Scrolls of Escape are super rare. And the reasoning is because it allows you to instantly teleport to a city. And you don't have to go into your inventory like this to activate it. If you go to your emote wheel, you can put consumables on the emote wheel. So we can put the Scroll of Escape in our emote wheel, which is going to be really handy for playing hardcore. So if I press E, it's right there, and if I were to, like, you know, click it, then I would be able to just instantly, like, teleport away and get me out of a really bad situation. So Blast Wave Shrine, that's going to instantly delete any enemies we're standing next to. Let's see if we can make it a little bit into the boss area. I don't want to kill the boss with Blast Wave. I'd rather showcase the Frost build properly, but well, I'm happy to kill any little bits of trash with this. Let me just kill a couple of trash mobs with this Blast Wave, just to get to this last boss a little bit quicker. Wait a minute, I've got to kill all the enemies. That's one of the requirements for this. Luckily I realized, because I think I may have naughtily skipped a couple of mobs. Let me just check I didn't miss any mobs around here. Now we're good. So we've got to kill all the monsters here, and then we should get the last boss. As you can see, like, we have never really been under any threat of dying. I'm playing pretty carefree, honestly, on hardcore here. The amount of protection that you have with the barriers is really good. Like, generally I'm crowd controlling stuff the majority of the time. You know, the elites are generally getting frozen pretty quickly. I will say the mobs with the shields are probably the most annoying though, of the trash mobs. These skeleton captains are a right pain, they take a little while. Greed Shrine, that basically means I get more money after hitting mobs. If I do take a lot of damage, then this bubble's here to kind of protect me as well. It's a very defensive build, but it's not like I'm sacrificing really any damage, it feels like, for the safety net that I have. So I'm free to kind of just run around and not really care what's around the corner. This dungeon's taking quite a long time to clear out. But hopefully you can kind of see like the gameplay loop. I should be using Blizzard first to reduce the cooldown of my right click by 10%. I do sometimes kind of slack on that a little bit. I've got a little elite, I've got frozen, but I can just teleport away. Pop ice armor, not because I am actually worried about dying, it's just going to give me more mana regeneration and increase the amount of damage that I'm doing. Kind of annoyingly have to kill every single mob. Alright, we need to go north. But yeah, like, playing this Frozen spec, I haven't really felt like once, like, oh god, I could actually die. Whereas like, when I was playing Lightning, there were a couple of instances where it was just, like, not many, to be fair, but like there were a couple of instances where it's like, oh, I could actually have like died in this situation. And one thing I'll say about this build as well that is like maybe more negative is like the ultimate ability is just kind of giga trash, and it's just like, it's a shame that at least in the current state, the ultimate ability is just seems kind of lacking a huge damage sacrifice for an invulnerability when you could just take another defensive ability, which would be that on way lower cooldown. I don't know, but I'll have to see in the future of what that ice block ability holds. So here we have an elite, so we're going to be popping the number 4, the ice blades, quite quickly here, and you can see already that the target's vulnerable, and it's been vulnerable for quite some time already, and we have ice blades back up again. So we've basically got like a 100% uptime on ice blades for as long as this mob doesn't actually like teleport away, which I'm kind of worried it might do. The ice blades back up again. So you see that yellow bar under the health bar at the top? That's staggered. So that's about to get filled up here. So it's now staggered, which means it's stunned. which means we can just do anything that we want right now. When it's staggered as well, it makes it so that the blades have a very easy time bashing on the target. So as you can see, it's like not potentially the fastest way to kill a boss, but it's still pretty damn close to being the fastest, and overall it was pretty safe, and the stagger just makes things easier. And the vulnerability stacking of the blades was basically permanent uptime, which I was telling you about earlier. It was probably up like 95% of the time there. So those blades are just whacking away. Maybe there'll be some augmentation with the ice blades later on that we'll be able to take in the future at higher levels to maybe do more damage or something to single targets, but or have maybe multiple of these could be quite interesting. But yeah, that's the Frost build. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you have any questions, feel free to ask down below, and I'll be more than happy to try and help. I will be covering fire and lightning, and also some system mechanics with enchanting that we can actually do in the beta right now, and future enchanting, which is in the game but we don't have access to because we're too low level. I'm really looking forward to playing Diablo 4 and release. I'm looking forward to making more content for you guys, so be sure to subscribe, and I will be making more Diablo 4 content. All the best, take care, and see you for another video. Be sure to look underneath, by the way, underneath the video in the description if there's the fire and lightning build ready. I'll put them in the description down below.